Welcome. It's time to transform time. This is an experiential workshop facilitated by myself, Jan Ogren. Have you ever felt that you don't have enough time? Linear time controls how we think and what we believe about the world. It also creates tremendous stress as we struggle with not enough time to do all we need to. There are other forms of time that can create opportunities and places for healing. So we're going to explore this all in 3 parts, starting with part 1 with an introduction.
Thank you. So I'm so glad that you're all here, and there's also, it's not just us in the room. I did want to point out that it's being videotaped because quite a few people this time didn't work for them to be here. So I'm videotaping it, but I want to be very considerate of everyone here. If anyone has an issue about being videotaped or would prefer not to, let me know, and you can either kind of lean on this side of the room or we can edit you out. Does anyone have an issue? Okay, great. Okay, that's wonderful because I did want to open this up more for everyone to participate, and for those that are doing online. It's kind of nice. We're already spreading out and into the wider world. If you do this with a friend, it can be really helpful because this is very experiential, and some of the things can be fun to just play with other people. And we are going to explore tonight. So, oh, that's right. Thank you. Anybody that has electronic devices, please turn them on vibrate or mute. And thank you for reminding me of that. Perfect timing.
I did that on purpose.
Absolutely, yes. That was great. And there are chairs up front. Yeah, I know. That's okay. But we'll have time for that later. Yeah. So thank you very much. Because this is going to be experiential. If you came for somebody to be an expert and give you the 7 steps to get out of linear time, sorry, but I'm just really questioning this myself. So I'm really delighted to share this because linear time is something that I've been struggling with, as I'll talk about later. And so the chance to really explore it is very exciting, and to get to explore it with all of you. So what we're going to be doing tonight is that I'm going to give you a bit of an intro about myself, so you get a basis of where I'm coming from and why I'm focusing on time. Then we're going to use our imagination to go into different types of time. And you can also journal at that time too. There's some paper over there if you like to journal. And there'll also be then, we're going to do some movement. Now, whenever I offer something like movement or imagination, do what fits for you. And there's always adaptations. So you can do it seated, you can do it moving, you can observe, whatever fits for you. And I want you to take care of yourself and enjoy the evening. So then we'll do, again, some more imagination about time, journeying. And I'll tell you a little bit about just how linear time got to be and how very recent it is as a concept of time. And then, as I said on the flyer, I was promising to show you how if you slow down, you actually get to where you want to go faster. So we'll do that demonstration together, because it's certainly something that's helped in my life a lot. And then we'll drop into the last type of time, which is shamanic time. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing this evening. So first, I just want to call us together. Breathe. Oh, you look like a great group. Look at you. You're already getting in your chair. You're getting comfortable, feet on the floor. to just be in an open space. To just that I'm offering this for healing. Because one of the things I've found is that linear time can be very stressful. And there are other times that open up more to healing, expansion. And so I just call in all spirits. And this is the equinox, that balance. There's a seat up front, Dimitri.
That's all right.
And just have this intention of all being welcome, that we experience here and share here for the highest good of ourselves, of our community, of our natural world, and for the whole cosmos. Take another breath. Let it be so. So, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I have a practice in Santa Rosa. And I'm fascinated by how our consciousness and how we perceive things really affect the world tremendously. And I've been paying attention more to that about time. And I've been a psychotherapist exploring that for about 30 years. And also about that same time, I've been apprenticing with a Mescalero Apache. And that is taking a medicine way or a shamanic path of exploring and expanding the world in a way that is definitely going to come in at the end when I talk about shamanic time and tell you a little bit more about my teacher and how he does very interesting things with time. And so I'm also using this opportunity of presenting about time to nudge myself more into the realms of just going beyond linear, not only linear time, but the concepts of time, and to see where it can lead us. And I'll come to that in a minute. One of the challenges I had in doing this is that this is set in a linear time concept. You know, I said, you know, start at 7:30 and go to 9, and you know, I'll agree. And linear time is very helpful. But I found doing this is kind of like, well, these are all pieces together, so I almost want to say them all together, because they don't actually, they're not linear, but they're all, by being a psychotherapist, my apprenticing with Apache, and then by being a writer and storyteller, all intertwine. So I want to tell you a story about how I got to be here right now. And it starts actually with Edgar Mitchell, who was an Apollo 14 astronaut. And he was flying back from the moon, guiding the space shuttle. And he had what was called a noetic experience, an expanding experience of realizing that the cells in his body were connected to the star dust, were connected to all the cosmos. And he was an astrophysicist, and he was like, okay, what just happened to me? And so he came back to Earth, and he started the Institute of Noetic Science, which we're very fortunate actually is in Petaluma here. And I became a member of that 30 years ago because I was raised very scientifically. I was studying to be a neuroscientist, and yet I got a calling to, like, what is this consciousness? And at that time, back in the 70s, science wasn't really, well, it still has some problems with consciousness, but it really wasn't accepting it. So then I studied transpersonal psychology, and I blended the two, and that's what the Institute of Noetic Science does, is it blends consciousness and science, and it scientifically studies consciousness in amazing ways. I highly recommend that place. Fascinating. So I went there one time. I got invited to go to a special members orientation, and when I was there were some spirits that talked to me. And they basically wanted me to write a book. And they asked me to help them. And so I kind of created that into a book. I made it a fiction because I'm a storyteller. And I know for myself, I will read a story easier than I will read a nonfiction. So I created the story of Miranda, who just wants to live an ordinary life. But her spirits want her to go to this meeting. It's a pharmaceutical conference. And when she's there, she meets these land spirits whose sacred cave is actually now buried underneath the manufacturing plant of the pharmaceutical company. So she has to help them with the aid of an extinct bear, an Irish ghost, and a law student. And then she has the problems that she doesn't want to ruin her relationship or lose her job or do all sorts of other crazy things. So it's an adventure. And I wrote this, number one, because the spirits kept, every time I'd meditate, they'd say, write the book, write the book. And I'm like, okay. Is to make it feel more common for people to just talk with spirits, to let spirits be present in the world in very different forms. And then also to give a version of how the world is transforming. And that we are in a very crucial time. And noetic science is actually charting the transformation of consciousness that is occurring. So through writing the book, I then met with a filmmaker who was basically invited me, this is the abridged version, but she invited me to go down to Honduras to be there and help participate in the Maya calendar change in 12/21/2012. And so that happened, and there's a flyer on the back that in May I'm going to be doing a talk again, sharing the slides, which I did here actually a few months ago. And that tells more about that story. I just wanted to share that because while I was down there with the Mayas, they are incredible calendar makers and understanders of the cosmos. And they see time in this amazing, huge realm. And one of the things that they were saying, which was very different than the Hollywood movies that saw 2012 as a great opportunity to make a huge disaster movie, and, is that it is actually the end of one time and a beginning of a new time. And that it was a time of opportunities and a time of transformation. And the Incas actually saw that as a time to go beyond linear time. And I thought that was fascinating. And so I started, back in 2012, I started really looking at this whole concept of time. So I was exploring that, and let's see. Well, I guess I better check. What time is it? Anybody have, what? Yeah, what is? Okay, all right, there you go. That is a correct answer, Nick. It's,
There is a correct answer to that?
yes, because that's linear time. It's numbers. So when I refer to linear time, what it is it's the concept that time moves from the past to the future. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, from the future to the past. That's okay. See, I'm already moving beyond linear time. This is great. So linear time is that concept of moving from the future into the past. And it's organized by clocks and all. So before I talk a little bit more about linear time, what I want to do is I want to go pre-linear. So I want to do a little bit of time travel. And I want to take us way back to the beginning of when humans were in Africa. And I was very fortunate because I was just in East Africa. And there on the equator, they see time, and they still see it that way. That's, I put up a clock over there. And these clocks are kind of, but you notice it's different because you see in the equator, the sun pretty much always rises at 6 and it sets at 6. So you can pass around, because sometimes it helps to just see how things could look different, because we're so used to clocks looking one direction, one way. And for them, so 1 o'clock is 1 hour after sunrise. Yeah? And 1 p.m. is 1 hour after sunset. And they found that because time was very circular for them. There was this balance. And time was about when the sun rose and when the sun set. And so back then, if you said, "What time is it?" people would look up. They'd look up in the sky and they'd see the sun, or if it was night, they'd look up at the stars. And they'd go, "Oh, okay." They knew the stars very well. And that is how they did time. And not only was that a circle, but also the animals circled. They're the wildebeests and the zebras and the gazelles. They would circle around as the seasons circled with rain and drought and everything. So time was circular then. And so I want you to imagine, let go of the ideas of time that we have, and imagine living in nature, where time was all about the movement of the sun and the stars. And if you'd like, you can close your eyes. If it works to journal, you can journal. But I want to give you some moments to really settle and imagine living where time was about the sun and the moon and the stars. And it just circled and circled and circled. And as you imagine, I'll throw some ideas out, and you can listen to them or just imagine for yourself. But feel in your body, if you will. How does your body feel right now? Imagining time circling, time moving like that in a day, a balanced day, just like our equinox right now. How would you imagine your relationships to other people, to the tribe you're in? How would that be different if you related in this circular manner? How would your life be different? And take another breath and store away anything that you would like to come back to later. Because I'm just giving you little tidbits. I'm giving you ideas, and there'll be certain times that you want to go explore more, and you're free to do that. So right now, this is just a suggestion. Remember something about this time, how it felt in your body, what you imagine your life would be like. And now we're going to go into another type of time that was very common then, which relates to this, and that is called, I kind of created these words for the time. I call this event time. And when I did this presentation before, my father was here, and he grew up on a farm, and after the presentation he goes, "I knew event time really well. That's how we farmed. We milked the cows by event time." And he was laughing. He said, "Yeah, there was never anything of looking at our watches." Well, I didn't have a watch. You know, he was in the Depression. There was like maybe one parlor clock, but you got up in the morning and then it was milking time. And you milked until that was done. And he said there's no concept of saying, okay, milking time is from 6:45 to 7:30, and you get up to the last cow and you're like, "Oh, sorry, 7:30. You know, gotta punch out, sorry." And the same thing is like, well, if it goes really fast and it's only 7:20, well, you didn't have to stand there for 10 minutes waiting till 7:30. So event time was how people lived then. So if somebody asked you, "What time is it?" you'd check in with yourself. And you go, well, I'm hungry. It must be eating time. Or, I can hear the cows mooing. It's milk time. Or we don't have much food. It's gathering time or hunting time. Or we're together and we're satisfied and it's dancing time. So this was a different way of relating. And event time, it happens with, there's a beginning to the event. It's like deciding, okay, now's the time for drumming. And we're drumming, and then there's an ending to it. So event time has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And now I'm going to invite you again, close your eyes if you want. Imagine living by events. Not by numbers, but by events. What would that be like? How would you know what event was coming up? And again, check in with your body. How does your body feel as you imagine doing event time? And you might see that your body actually has a say in this time. It says, oh, this is eating time. This is sleeping time. These are different times. And again, ask yourself, how would this affect my relationships with other people? How would my family be different if we lived through events? How would my life feel? How would I feel about myself if my life was structured and organized by events that I did? Just breathe with that, explore. And see what emotions are coming up as you imagine living your life by events. And now letting that event come to its close, taking another breath, again filing away anything you'd like to come back to. And I think I forgot to mention, but I'm getting this on my website and my blog, so if you're like going, what was that a time or something, you can always, the bookmarks that's got my website, and you can always go there and say, oh, okay, right, there's circular time, there's event time, and then you can remember again and explore that. Now, personally, in my explorations, I've come to really like event time. And I think that's been the easiest way for me to step out of linear time, because like I'll be going home from work. In fact, I did recently, just this week, and on my to-do list, on my linear list of like, okay, I've got to make time for this, it was preparing for this talk. And yet, Tuesday night I went home from work and I was checking in, and I said, well, wait a second, what time is it? And I checked in with my body, and I'm hungry. It's time to eat. And then I checked in again. What time is it? And I was like, I've got this book. I'd really like to read this book. So it's time for reading. And then it was like, oh, it's time to send out an email notice to everybody to remind them of this talk. And it just fit naturally. I didn't have to like pressure myself to do it. It was just like, okay, this is the time. So I like this a lot better because as you can probably imagine, I'm not that good with linear time. Anybody who knows me and knows that it's a bit of a challenge for me. And part of this is cultural, because different cultures have different relationships to time. And I grew up in France. And in France, if somebody invites you to dinner at 7 o'clock, you'd be extremely rude if you arrived before 8. And so coming over here, that was hard, especially because I I met some friends that were Japanese, and when they say come over, you know, by 7 o'clock, they really mean be there by about 6:30. And so that clashed. And I also have a challenge, and this is the cartoon. I got this from Steve Randall, and I also in my blog, I'll have references to other websites I've used and all. And so this is a little cartoon that shows what linear time is. And so it has it coming from the future. It's like linear time is like a conveyor belt with these boxes on it. And the box is then your time allotment, and then it moves into the past. So I'll pass these around too, and you can, there's one up on the wall there. So part of what happens is that I find that there's a lot of pressure with linear time because this is a time that moves. And so I've got this amount of time to fill this box, and then it goes over and it kind of disappears behind a wall. And I imagine for myself that there's a judge standing over there, and they're like looking in each box. She wasted that one. Not too bad. Gets a B+ on that. Oh, geez, what's in there, you know? So I find that there's a lot of judging when linear time comes up. And a lot of pressure, too, because the other thing is that, well, once that's gone, you know, it's just moving along. And, you know, it's like gone. I can't change it. And I can't do anything about the future. It's just going to come along on this conveyor belt. So I find there's a lot of pressure. And for those of you who are about my age and stuff, you might remember Lucille Ball did a thing once where she was on a conveyor belt, chocolates. Yeah, I know. She was like, you know, she's wrapping the chocolates, and they come, and then they say, speed it up, and, you know, all these chocolates are passing. She's supposed to wrap each one, and I think that's the epitome of linear time. Plus I find laughing at it helps a lot. So, for one thing, there's this idea with linear time that it's the same speed. And for I think everyone has had a moment where time really seems to slow down. Have you ever had one where you're like looking at the clock and going, wow, it's only been 5 minutes? What kind of time? What have you experienced that has been slow? End of the day, work, okay.
Cooking, waiting for water to boil.
Okay, yeah, it takes forever. You watch it and it slows down. What about when time speeds up? So what are those? When you're having fun? My vacations go really fast. Other things that make time go faster?
Your community.
Okay. Yeah. Taxes are due. Yeah, suddenly. Oh my God, yeah.
Also, when you remember an event, it's like 2 years ago, and then people tell you, that was 4 years ago. It's like, really?
Yeah.
The time is like, where did it go?
Yeah, so there is a really subjective nature to how fast this conveyor belt goes. So I want to go into a little bit of just where did this conveyor belt come from? Because it wasn't back in East Africa when the sun was rising and setting and the moon and the stars. There's no conveyor belt. And event time and stuff, that had a beginning and a middle and an end. It didn't, you know, didn't have this kind of sense. So basically what happened was humans started moving away from the equator, and so they had to start working with time because now time was no longer 6 to 6, and so they started having those sundials so that you can kind of tell, because now sometimes different months the sun would be, you know, be rising earlier or later, and so they're trying to figure things out. And then the more civilization happened, then the more kind of organization they needed. So I'm going to talk about the Roman calendar, which is just one calendar. There's many different ones. I wish I could talk more about the Maya calendar, but that takes a lifetime. That's amazing. And we use the Roman calendar. So basically it started by Romulus, the first king of Rome, or emperor of Rome, around 753 BCE. And so he was trying to figure out. So he decided he'd have these days. And so he started with the year in March. And he gave it 10 months, with 6 months of 30 days and 4 months of 31 days. And the winter season was just kind of left on its own. So you ended up having a calendar with 304 days. And that didn't quite work too well. Because you have to remember now, we're going back in time where you can't look at a calendar. You can't, look at your cell phone and see, what day it is or the calendar. So it's really important. It's like, how do you figure it out? I mean, how many days are in the year? And how do you tell the year, in terms of when is the equinoxes, when are the solstices? I mean, that takes a lot of calculation and figuring. So they worked it out, and the next Roman emperors decided around 700 BCE that we needed a couple more months. So he threw in January and February. And this got the length to 354 days. But that wasn't quite enough either. So they threw in this extra month. And they decided that they would put the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of the College of Pontiffs in ancient Rome, would decide the exact length of the month. Now, one of the challenges with that is that the term of office for the Pontifex Maximus was determined by the length of the year. So if you had somebody that wanted to end a little sooner, the month would be shorter. If somebody wanted to stay in office longer, he'd make a longer month. So it changed a lot. But eventually they worked it out. Pope Gregory the 13th in 1582 actually was the one who got the calendar what it is today. So one of the things, again, is this just happened to be, that's how it ended up being calendars. So, at that time it was, Christian-based and everything, Catholic. And so I like to think about, well, what would have happened had God created the world in 4 days instead of 7? Then the calendar might have looked really different. And again, just to because we get so accustomed to how something is, we forget that it was created. Now, with the Mayas, they had, yeah, I know, you only worked 2 days, huh? Pretty good week, huh? Now, the Mayas have, they have a lot of different calendar systems. And I'm just using an example that they do have a system where the year is in 18 days, and they have 20 of them. And so, not that they ever, because they're very circular, so they wouldn't do it this way. But if I was to take the Maya view, then the months would look like this. So again, it's just to see how different it could be had we done things differently. So the other thing is, now that the days were divided up, had to figure out how you divide up the actual hours in the day. So we got it pretty well in terms of, once we were out of the equator, then instead of the beginning of the day being sunrise, it made it noon and all. And so noon and midnight. And each town would actually decide on their own, because it's not that easy. Again, remember, this is back, you don't have clocks that are like automatic, because now we actually have, there's this atomic clock in the Midwest somewhere that will tell you time to the nth degree. I mean, it's just like so many decimal points. And this was before that. This was back when people rode around and horses and wagons and stuff. And so, they did have clocks. And so they'd set them by looking up at the sky and going, okay, this is noon. So noon would be slightly different. Like, say, the people here that are from Petaluma, say your Petaluma time was like 5 minutes faster. So, for coming here, it would have actually, you'd have been here more like 7:25. And Sebastopol, they're laid back, so they'd be more like 7:40 or something. And then Santa Rosa, well, they're actually 10 minutes ahead. But it wouldn't really matter that people had different times, because by the time you got on your horse and you rode over here, people would be here and, still kind of run more by events than, by a clock. What happened to change all that was the trains started. And you now got places faster. And so at the beginning, you had to figure out, okay, so whose time gets to be on the train? Well, it ended up they decided that the station you left from would have the time. So the conductor would wind his big watch, he'd wind it, he'd set it to the time. So if he was in Paris, he'd set it to Paris, and then the train would head off. And by the time it got to Vienna, well, then he was still on Paris time, but of course Vienna time was kind of different. So it got kind of confusing, and especially if you think about trains, and you had more than one train, and you wanted to make sure they reached the station at the right time so they could go on 2 different tracks. So this became very important. So then interestingly I found is that a very familiar name was, got his first job at the patent office in Bern, Switzerland, to work on the problem of synchronization of clocks, and his name was Albert Einstein. And so he helped figure out how to create it so that there was now a time that you could synchronize time between certain places. So now the trains all had their time, but you still had each city having their own time. And it was an interesting thing back then, politics, is that some towns, they didn't just change their time, like, oh, sure, we'll change our time. Because if you think, too, we've got these funny things called time zones. So imagine that a representative from the railroad goes up to the mayor of the town and says, we want you to change your noon time now. We want it to be 45 minutes earlier so that it will synchronize, because this town over here, it's going to go 15 minutes later, and they're going to be a whole hour off in the next state here. Well, they're like, I don't want to change my time. You're making me change my noon. So it ended up being quite an interesting battle. But as you know, that the trains won, and time became something that was then all regimented. And again, this is very recent. So it's like I said before, circular time, event time, that's something that's been around a long time. Linear time, as we know it, and we really use it, has only been around a little over 100 years. So this new thing has been here, and I don't know that people really questioned. The railroads didn't set up this sociological study and say, well, how is this going to affect human beings, our relationships, how we feel, our health, having this regimented time, this clear time? So, so it's kind of left for people like me who kind of go, well, what is this linear time? What does it do to us? And one of the questions I have is, how does it relate to our relationships and to competition? Because you see, with linear time, it's on a line instead of circles, and how things are in circles. When it's linear, you can now have somebody before somebody else. So think about it, we just went through the Olympics. Well, you can't have the Olympics without very clear clocks saying this person was faster than that person. And so a lot of competitions, especially sports, are all based on this linear time. And then also, when it's linear, you can have people above or below, ahead and behind. So there's a lot of judgments and stuff.